South African filmmaker Anant Singh is one of the many who are honoring Fugard's legacy, and he joins us now via video link. Mr. Singh, thank you so much for your time. I was just listening to just those many tributes. I mean, Athol Fugard has been hailed amongst others for profoundly transforming South African theatre. He was that and perhaps more. As we get your reaction to the news of his passing, perhaps speak to us about what he meant to you, to the arts and the country at large, just given his political position, of course, also against apartheid.
Thank you very much. You know, his passing is a huge loss to not only South Africans, but to people all around the world. I think what Athol had this remarkable talent to tell stories and to inspire and to be able to navigate the emotion of what those theatre plays were all about in a time when it was very risky to do. And he brought it to the theatre. We went to see these shows. It was a segregated South Africa. And for some reason in those days, there were a few theatres that were allowed to play these shows to people of color. And this is where I learned and saw how the power of performance and storytelling could engage an audience to become more aware and more politicized. So clearly, you know, when I sort of experienced that in the late 70s, early 80s, I kind of embraced it and tried to incorporate some of that into film. And it was really special to be able to watch these shows in theaters, and thereafter many years later to engage with him personally when I acquired the rights to make a film of his world-renowned play, Road to Mecca. Also, his collaborations on theatre were very well known, and people like Danny Glover, Kathy Bates, all performed in his shows. These are Oscar-nominated and Oscar-winning performers that loved the way he wrote, the way he directed, and the way he brought shows to audiences.
Yeah, and I mean, as a renowned film producer yourself, you've had the opportunity, as you say, to collaborate with Fugard. Just give us a sense of how that was for you, especially on, as you've also mentioned, the film adaptations, The Road to Mecca, and how his work will continue, you think, to inspire future generations. Interestingly, in that previous interview, you know, they speak of how, you know, Athol Fugard also had this capacity to challenge people, his gladiators. Maybe just a sense of that time as you worked with him closely.
When he was in New York and on stage on Broadway and off Broadway, you know, all these huge talents, as I mentioned, Danny Glover, Kathy Bates, and there were so many others that were hugely inspired by him and loved to work with him. And you'll see in these theatre adaptations around the world, all some very, very powerful and profound actors. So I think, you know, he was a sort of actor's director. And I think actors appreciate that. I think from a standpoint of film, you know, he also performed in the role of Jan Smuts in the Oscar-winning, I think it won 10 Oscars, Richard Attenborough's Gandhi. And his performance there was really quite remarkable. And I thought that as a South African playing Smuts, he was really epitomized the ability to harness this complex character so well.
And just maybe give us a sense and talk to us about the power of storytelling, particularly in the international stage. I mean, you mentioned so many powerful actors now, the likes of the Kathy Bates, how he was able then through his storytelling connect South Africa's plight, particularly during that time of apartheid, and also through the body of his work, just that understanding that really transcended borders.
Well, I think that's a huge point, that it transcended borders. And I think when you look at his plays, yes, these were performed in theaters around the world. But on the film front, I think his first a play that was adapted into a film was Busman and Lina. And that, I think I saw it for the first time in the Cannes Film Festival. I think it must have been early 80s or late 80s. And it was great to have a South African film play in Cannes in those early days, and for it to be one of Athol's, and that the reaction again was quite remarkable. And so coming back to his ability to tell stories, I think his writing was really quite profound. He was able to engage on all levels with all ethnicities in his stories, the complexities of the human elements of every individual character in those plays. And I think that in itself is a remarkable talent. And all of this coming, at a time when there were no real exceptional talents of theater on a global stage. And Athol was a trailblazer in that regard.
And as we wrap up our conversation, Mr. Singh, maybe let's talk about his legacy then for the next generation. I mean, what we are witnessing now coming out of South Africa is marvel at best, because you're seeing more and more South African artists, just entering rooms never entered before on an international scale. When we talk about these big awards from this part of, the industry that we're speaking of, they say that, many people are, of course, or stood on the shoulders of giants, and that's what we are witnessing now. Just from a legacy perspective, what does he leave behind?
Well, I think there are two facets to that. I think, as we discussed already, the inspiring nature of his storytelling, be it on theater, on the page, or on film. But then the other side of that is very much the inspiration that he gives to young talents and trailblaze in his footsteps. When you look at from the musical talents of our country, whether it's Tyler, or last week in the Oscars, there was a South African film, short film called The Last Ranger, which all of these are really remarkable in that they are starting to be able to platform themselves on a global stage. And I think that's what Athol was very successful in doing, that he not only brought his plays to South African audiences, he was able to travel them around the world and be able to communicate these stories and our hardships through apartheid globally. And I think when one is a storyteller in whichever medium, you have to stay true to your roots and try to tell the most powerful and the best way of doing those stories in whichever medium you're working on. And Athol certainly did it on multi-layers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking to us, and of course for your tributes and your kind words there to Athol Fugard.